StephenCurry, congratulations
Thank you,
on
Jim.
your performance in Hounds of Love, which is probably the scariest performance I've seen from a man since Daniel Henshall in
Wow.
Snowtown.
Well, that's I appreciate that. That's quite incredible. I think that's his performance in Snowtown is something to behold, and to be held in that esteem is a
I'm
great
just
thrill.
wondering whether you've realised that, okay, we've got Snowtown, Wolf Creek, and now Hounds of Love. Australia technically now has a subgenre of serial killers.
That's right. Well, it's better than I used to work in a video store. It's better than the fact that Australian was a subgenre. It was that. It was like, yeah, there's drama and there's thriller and there's comedy and there's Australian. You go, oh, that's a genre, is it? Look, it is. It's amazing. I think, if you think about Justin Kurzel's Snowtown and of course Greg McLean's Wolf Creek, it's they're films that are born out of kind of an insane, intense realism, and probably more so Snowtown than Wolf Creek, because there is a bit of black humour involved in Wolf Creek, I guess, but it's something that I think is very, very hard to shake when there is such a dedication to the realism side of things, and a sort of an unflinching need to tell this story in as truthful terms as possible. I think you can't look away then. And I don't know why it is that we make these films really well, but Ben Young, the writer and director of this, first time feature film director, I might just add.
Extraordinary.
Which is remarkable. He's just got this incredible skill and this, deft talent to make
Can you,
a film
in a
like that.
nutshell, try and describe the film?
Okay.
Without giving too much away.
Okay, so it's a film, it's about the psychology of codependence, I guess, is what I would say, right? So it's about the depths that humans will sink to maintain their perceived position in life. So John and Evelyn White are a husband and wife team that go around basically abducting young girls and murdering them. Very loosely based on a bunch of different stories from around the world. Ben Young's mother is a crime writer. And so he's always been very obsessed with true crime, and in particular, this idea of codependence and what codependence leads to, and what it can lead to. You think about how many, and it is an alarming number of husband and wife teams that have committed these kind of acts. So he sort of was very fascinated by that, and I've always been very fascinated by that. So we started talking when I was casting this film about wanting to get into the psychology of it, right? So he sent me all these books about the cases that he had used as inspiration. And they were from all over the world. One case in WA as well, but a whole bunch all around the world. And the remarkable thing was the similarities between these people, in particular the two people at the helm of each of these cases. Always, it was a man who was a psychopath or sociopath or whatever, some kind of path, who found a bird with a broken wing and took her under his wing, built her up to feel so thankful and so protected and so loved by him that she would do anything for him. And when you feel that way about someone who lacks empathy and who is a psychopath and just a complete animal, and make no mistake, this person that I play is the worst person imaginable, then unspeakable things happen. And this is what we had to remind ourselves the whole way through this film, is that this stuff happens to real people. This is a fictional tale, but that kind of kept us grounded in reality and gave us a sense of responsibility in telling the story in as truthful a way as possible.
Underscoring that, I think, is this suburban setting.
Yeah.
And the fact that the house, apart from those little signs that she suffers from OCD,
Yeah.
it's a normal house.
Yeah.
And it plays to that idea that you don't know what's happening behind the front door of a suburban house, wherever you are.
That's right. That's right. It's the normality. And this film in the wrong hands would have been, that house, the designer would have picked a house of horrors, right? But they picked the most normal looking house that you would never even look twice at. The costume designer, Terry Lamera, chose some drab colours and all that sort of stuff, but it wasn't big 80s brush strokes. It's just enough to put us in the time, right? Ben's direction shows that kind of restraint in the fact that he's happy to close the door and not. You don't see a lot of brutality in this film. It's all most of it's implied, but it's far more affecting that way, I think, personally. And then it sort of came back to the performances, and the performances had to match that restraint. So we had to kind of, you couldn't play these people as kind of moustache twirling bad guys, one note bad people. You had to play these people as humans first, right? And Ashley Cummings, who plays our young victim, she's not just the nicest pie little girl. She's also got her own foibles going in there, but she's an innocent. She's a 17-year-old girl. She's a complete innocent, but we needed everyone to fall into that uniform concept of restraint. And I think it's realised, that is realised in a very positive way.
You showed with The King that you can do much more than comedy, which was primarily what you're known for.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
How did this role strike you when it came? Was it like, thank you, God?
I was busting, man, like busting.
Why?
Okay, I was for years and years and years, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm thankful for every job I've ever had, okay? And I've been very, very fortunate. But I've just been busting to play a bad guy. And no one was ever going to trust me with it. No one was ever going to think of me for it. And it wasn't on my horizon, right? So the casting woman, Anusha Zarkesh, basically put my name on a list of go-to bad guys you'd think of for this role. And I think Ben thought it was a typo first or whatever, but like he's looked at it and gone, I don't know about Curry. But anyway, so we ended up, she said, look, I've sent it to him. He's read it, and then when I read it, I kept flicking through it going, where's the bit where the bumbling guy comes through the door? You know, like I didn't think that John could possibly be the role that they were thinking of me for. And then all of a sudden it clicked that this was the role and this was the one, and I read it and I loved it, and she sort of got on to Ben and said, look, he loves it. Can you have a chat to him? And we chatted, and, the rest is history, as they say.
Can I just unpack that just with two
yes,
questions?
Please. Yeah.
Just firstly, what's the muscle? What's the acting muscle that's getting exercised when you do a role like this, which is so contrary to your real person?
Do you know what it is? It's inescapable. This role, when you're in it, is inescapable. Comedy roles, well, most comedy roles, it's all pretendies. You get in there, you do it, you say the stuff, you try and make it as funny as possible, and you get out, and you have your beer, and you have your shower, and you go to bed, and you get up and do it again. This is completely and utterly inescapable. The character himself, as I said, is the worst human imaginable. The things he's doing are completely unspeakable. The performances that was honoured to be acting opposite with these two amazing women, Emma Booth and Ashley Cummings, were so compelling and so heartbreaking that you actually can't extricate yourself from the simple fact that this stuff happens to real people. That was the difference. It wasn't, and I'm not method or anything like that, right? But the major difference was that once you're in this, you can't get out of it. So that's that. It sort of took a lot. It takes, for me, it takes a lot more. It takes a lot more kind of dedication to the role to do that, because it means you don't just go in and do the pretendies. It means you have to actually commit for the entire time that you're there.
There's a scene in the film where your character, John White, is in the bathroom, just in front of the mirror.
Yeah.
And you hold the shot. Ben Young holds the shot.
He doesn't mind holding a shot, does he?
Yeah, and thank God for that.
Yeah.
Let's see more of that, thank you very much. But he holds the shot, and the character, John White, is looking at himself admiringly. What is going through that twisted mind in that scene?
He likes what he sees. He's a man who is the king of his domain, and it's a confidence game for him, and he is a complete and utter nihilist, which sells him short because he's also a psychopath and an animal. But he likes what he sees when he looks in the mirror, because he doesn't have empathy. He doesn't realise how his actions affect other people. He only cares about how things affect him.
It's also a good focus lock for the audience, because, when you see it happen, you go, how can people do this to young girls? And then you see that scene and you go, Oh, okay. So this is the center of his universe,
That's right.
and this is all that he cares about.
That's right.
Yeah.
And a very big consideration. Ben and I spent a lot of months on developing this character together. A big consideration for us was a man who is the king of his domain. And the OCD thing, by the way, is an affectation of John's. But now he has indoctrinated Evelyn, his wife, so heavily that she maintains that. So this is part of his power, right? So he's such the king of his domain. But the moment he steps over the precipice into the real world, he's nothing. He is picked on, he's put upon, he's nothing. And he hates that, which then informs his intrinsic need to maintain order in his house and to be the king. So I'm really glad that you brought up that mirror moment, because that is the personification of it. That's him at his peak of his powers and happiest with himself in life.
And we also do see him relate to other people, like the guy that he owes the money to.
Yeah.
And he's a plebe compared to this guy. And also it's interesting how he doesn't confront the neighbour. When the neighbour comes to complain, he leaves it to the woman to do.
He leaves it, and
Very,
that's
very
the thing.
telling.
He leaves the order to the woman. He leaves everything else because that's part of his power. And the other thing about John's power, which we discussed, is this power in silence. John uses silence to exact his power, I guess, to increase his power. He very rarely yells, John. And he only does because as a psychopath he can often lose his temper quite explosively. But what he does consciously is silence, because he knows the power of that. And and I think it's that sort of stuff. I think filmmakers who can appreciate silence I find their those scenes more compelling, because when it becomes a yell fest, it becomes very boring very quickly.
Well, it becomes torture porn.
It does, yeah, that's right.
And this is not that. This is not that.
No,
Actually, let's
right.
just quickly be very clear about this. There are torture porn films like the Hostel films. There are films that basically turn it into a fetish. This is much more a psychologically based film, which makes it very different.
That's right. And I think, and again, I talk about that restraint, and Ben Young shows this restraint, and he pulls away from that idea of torture porn because he doesn't want to show the violence, and he wants to give his audience, I guess, a bit more credit. I think you do. You pay your audience more respect by allowing them to use theatre of the mind on things that are unnecessary, because you go over that boundary into exploitation very, very easily if you get bogged down in the violence of the film. It's not about the physical violence. This film is about the psychology.
In an ideal world, StephenCurry, this film would be in everybody's mind right now.
Yep.
About 3 or 4 weeks ago, people would have started wondering, what the hell is this film on about? What is StephenCurry, Mr. Nice Guy from The Castle, and from Wog Boy, and from The Nugget, and from all the other comedy? What the heck is he up to in this movie? What is your view of marketing in general terms and in specific terms with this film? Because that's not happening right now. People should know about this film. And if this was an American movie, everyone would be knowing about it.
Yep, it's tricky.
Yes, it is.
Okay, this is what I think about that. This film has had more free publicity than arguably any Australian film for the last decade. Okay, because it's played 30 international festivals. It's on something like 92% on Rotten Tomatoes after 50, top critic reviews or whatever. That's massive. Okay, that's massive. So that in itself should be enough to warrant people sitting up and everyone knowing about it, at least. Whether they see it or not is by the by. In France, it's opened in the States last week on 26 screens. It opens in France on 50 screens next month. It opens in UK on 30, 40 screens or something, right through Europe, okay? It's opening here on, 10 screens, I guess. And we're hoping for word of mouth. It's kind of part of the cultural cringe, I suppose. It's very hard to get Australians to go and see Australian things. And there seems to be a bit of a push against making films that people sort of view as depressing or as, as too heavy. Like you see those articles every now and then in the paper that's like, here we go, another depressing Australian film that didn't make any money. I think this film will make a lot of money internationally, but it's about trying to get Aussies to sit up and see the talent that we've got here. And I would like to think that this is going to get the kind of word of mouth that people are going to sit up and pay attention to it in this country.
I certainly hope so.
The rest of the world is getting on board.
Because the record shows that when Australian audiences know about a good movie, they will flock to the thing.
That's right.
And if they know, or if they knew that this film was like A Silence of the Lambs, or they remember Snowtown, it's something in the vein of Snowtown, they'd flock to it. So I hope that is the case as well. But it breaks my heart, Stephen Curry.
Thank you, Jim. That's
to hear yet another
my heart too,
talented young person. It breaks my heart to hear another talented young film person talk about the cultural cringe, which should be a generation old by now. It should be history by now.
Yeah.
Why are we still talking about cultural cringe?
I don't know, man. There's still a bit of a thing about that too, with that notion of success being gauged by your overseas success, and that to me is part of that cringe. And I think I don't know what. There's no easy answer to this, okay? But I certainly would love to see in my lifetime a bit of a shift, a major shift, to appreciating exactly how much talent we do have in this country, because it's very hard to get films made here. We don't have the money, we don't have the population to warrant the money to make a lot of films, and so as such the films that do get made have a lot of weight on their shoulders, and you're going to have hits and you're going to have misses. But I'm with you, Jim. I think a film like this, I'm so proud of this film, and it's a film that I think is so unflinching but so incredibly handled. As I said, the temptation to go into exploitation was almost too great on this film. But we've got someone like Ben Young, and he's now off on his first big Hollywood blockbuster. But he is a superstar of the future. And it would be a real shame if films like this that he's made don't get seen, because I'll tell you, his next 5 blockbusters are going to get seen, but they might not be as good as this film. Because this is, without a doubt, the best film I've ever been lucky enough to be involved in, and they don't come around very often.
And it's, as I said, your performance is the scariest I've seen since Daniel Henshaw in Snowtown, and this is genuinely, hands down on the table, the scariest film I've seen since Snowtown.
Wow.
And that's not just Australian, that's any film.
That means a lot, Jim. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, pal.